It is March 8th, 2026, and the relationship between Canada and the United States, two countries that have long been best friends, neighbours, and military partners, is fraying in a way that is both very public and deeply consequential. What we are witnessing is more than a political spat. It is a seismic moment in North American defence history, a test of loyalty, sovereignty, and trust between two nations whose security has been intertwined for decades. The situation that has unfolded is the product of months of political maneuvering, technical assessments, and strategic debates, all now boiling over into the kind of headlines that could have seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. Canada has pushed back against Washington on one of the most consequential military procurement decisions in its modern history, and the reaction from the Trump administration has been swift, sharp, and in the eyes of many Canadians, threatening. This is not merely a story about fighter jets. It is a story about national identity, economic sovereignty, and the limits of alliance politics when one partner starts acting more like a landlord than a neighbour. To understand the magnitude of what is happening, we have to start with the foundation of continental defence, NORAD. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, established in 1958 during the height of the Cold War, was a revolutionary idea at the time. Canada and the United States, acutely aware that a Soviet nuclear attack could sweep across the Arctic faster than either country could respond alone, agreed to build a joint military command. NORAD was conceived as half American, half Canadian, a partnership that would monitor the skies, track incoming threats, and act in unison if danger approached the North American continent. From the outset, the command structure was designed to balance trust with operational control. The commander has always been an American four-star general, but the deputy commander is always Canadian. This arrangement, renewed and updated over more than 60 years, has operated on a principle of mutual respect and shared responsibility. For decades, it has worked beautifully. Until now. What has brought the alliance to a boiling point is the question of fighter jets. Canada's CF-18 Hornets, the mainstay of its air force, are aging out, and a decision on their replacement has become a political and strategic flashpoint. In 2021, Canada ran a formal competition to select the next-generation fighter aircraft. On technical and military grounds, the American-built F-35 Lightning II, produced by Lockheed Martin, was the winner. The plan was straightforward. Purchase 88 F-35s to modernize Canada's air capabilities and maintain interoperability with the United States. That plan worked for a time, but political winds shifted. Prime Minister Mark Carney came to power in Ottawa, bringing a new government sensitive to Canadian sovereignty, economic leverage, and public opinion increasingly skeptical of American influence. The idea of reconsidering the F-35 deal gained traction, and Canada began seriously evaluating an alternative, the Swedish-built Gripen fighter. The Swedish option, though it had lost the initial competition on technical merits, came with compelling advantages. SAR, the manufacturer, offered to build production facilities in Ontario and Quebec, creating an estimated 12,600 Canadian jobs. More importantly, the Gripen would allow Canada far more control over its own air force, reducing reliance on US supply chains and giving Ottawa a degree of independence that the F-35 could never offer. Polling reflected this sentiment. Roughly 7 out of 10 Canadians expressed reservations about committing exclusively to the F-35. That is a huge political signal, and the Carney government listened. Washington noticed immediately. The Trump administration responded with a mixture of warnings and threats, a signal to Ottawa that reconsidering the F-35 could carry consequences beyond the procurement decision itself. Late in January 2026, US Ambassador to Canada, Pete Huxra, gave an interview with CBC News that sent shockwaves through Canada's defence and political communities. He warned that NORAD would need to be altered if Canada did not proceed with the full F-35 purchase. In other words, the decades-old arrangement that had kept Canadian skies safe for over 60 years could be recalibrated if Canada exercised its sovereign right to make an independent military choice. Huxra's comments suggested a future where American jets could fly routinely over Canadian territory, filling gaps created by what he described as an inferior fighter. For Canadians, that was not simply a policy disagreement. It felt like an ultimatum. The reaction from Canada's defence and security experts was immediate and pointed. Andrea Sharon, director of the Centre for Defence and Security Studies at the University of Manitoba, warned that public threats like this could undermine North American deterrence, giving adversaries such as Russia and China insight into cracks in the alliance. Former National Security Advisor Vincent Ribby, a seasoned diplomat who served under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, called Huxra's remarks a political pressure tactic, one that should be taken seriously but not treated as gospel. The message from Canada's defence community was consistent. The United States was attempting to bully Canada into a weapons purchase, and that kind of pressure could destabilize, rather than strengthen, continental defense. At the same time, a new layer of complexity emerged with the Golden Dome Initiative, a U.S. missile defense program designed to intercept ballistic missiles approaching North America. This project relies heavily on radar networks and sensor systems across Canada's northern territories, making Canadian cooperation indispensable. Retired U.S. Four-star General Glenn Van Herk, former head of NORAD, put it bluntly. Canada controls the shortest Arctic routes from Russia, China, or North Korea to the continental United States. Without Canadian territory, the Golden Dome would have a critical blind spot. Yet Canada, mindful of Trump administration tariffs and economic pressure, took a measured stance. Its Department of National Defense issued statements that participation in the program would only proceed if the deal was fair, signaling that Canada would not simply accept unilateral American demands. Then Trump entered the public arena. Known for his blunt and transactional approach, he escalated the situation. He openly criticized Canada's hesitation over the F-35 purchase and framed the potential decision to buy Swedish jets as a betrayal of the alliance. According to Trump, defense procurement was not just a technical or military choice, it was a political statement. In his view, Canada's reluctance to commit to American equipment was an affront at a time when trade tensions and tariffs were already testing the bilateral relationship. Inside the administration, officials amplified the message, suggesting that Canada's actions were tantamount to going independent on defense, and that Washington would remember this in future negotiations. But the American strategy backfired. Far from intimidating Ottawa, the aggressive posture hardened public opinion in Canada. Nationalism surged as Canadians rallied around the idea of buying Swedish jets, securing domestic jobs, and asserting sovereignty in the face of perceived American overreach. The Carney government, which had positioned itself as a defender of Canadian independence against economic pressure, found the political moment advantageous. Standing up to Washington, or at least appearing to, became a popular move domestically, reshaping the narrative from a simple military procurement to a broader story about autonomy and national pride. There is also a broader geopolitical dimension. Canada is not alone in questioning dependence on American military hardware. Denmark, a NATO ally that had deployed F-35s to Greenland, openly expressed second thoughts about the decision by early 2026. While Denmark had little choice at that point, the F-35s were its only operational fighters. The cautionary stance signaled a broader trend among Western allies, reconsidering dependence on American supply chains in a world where alliance politics are increasingly transactional. For Canada, that context reinforced the strategic calculation. It is possible to maintain defense commitments while asserting independence in procurement decisions. The critical question now is how Canada will proceed. Ottawa has committed approximately $28.3 billion over the next 2 decades to modernize NORAD, including building new radar systems across the Arctic, scheduled to come online by 2029. That level of investment demonstrates that Canada has no intention of abandoning its defense partnership with the United States. Geography makes Canadian security inseparable from American security. Russia and China are monitoring the Arctic continuously, and the Continental Defense Partnership is indispensable. Yet within that framework, Canada is sending a clear message. It will make its own decisions on fighter jets, and it will not be bullied into purchasing equipment for the sake of alliance optics alone. This is a recalibration, a renegotiation of the partnership on terms that Canada finds acceptable. It is a subtle but significant shift in the balance of power between two long-standing allies. If Canada follows through with purchasing the Swedish Gripen, whether alongside or instead of F-35s, NORAD will face real operational challenges. Communication systems, data links, and maintenance requirements differ between the two aircraft. Integrating a mixed fleet would require careful planning, new procedures, and perhaps concessions from Washington. Analysts like Justin Massey from the University of Duke Quebec Memorial have raised pointed questions about whether the US would even approve full integration of the Gripen into NORAD, given the historically tight synchronization of Canadian and American air defense systems. Canada may assert its choice on paper, but in practice, operational dependence could still require American approval, a bind created not by Canadian weakness, but by decades of deep integration with the US military. What is unfolding is bigger than jets or procurement contracts. It is a story about sovereignty, economic leverage, and the meaning of partnership in an era where the senior ally increasingly acts like a landlord rather than a partner. Canada did not initiate this confrontation. It was pushed into it by tariffs, threats, and diplomatic pressure. The Canadian response, measured but firm, signals to Washington and to the world that middle-power democracies can assert themselves even against the most aggressive policies of a superpower. This is not merely a military story, it is a story about identity, negotiation, and strategic foresight. In the coming months, decisions on the fighter jet contract will be finalized. NORAD modernization will continue, and negotiations over the Golden Dome missile defense system will either advance or stall. Every choice Canada makes will send a message to allies and adversaries alike. The overarching question remains: can Canada and the United States recalibrate their relationship to a genuinely equal partnership? Or are we witnessing the beginnings of a lasting fracture between two countries whose cooperation has underpinned North American security for over a century? The implications of these decisions extend far beyond Ottawa and Washington. They reverberate through global geopolitics, testing the durability of alliances, the meaning of sovereignty, and the nature of security in the modern age. Canada's message is unmistakable. The country is committed to continental defence, but it will not be dictated to. It will negotiate, it will insist on fairness, and it will make independent decisions that reflect national interests. This stance, while calm and reasoned in tone, carries enormous weight. It signals to the United States, to NATO, and to the world that Canadian sovereignty and decision-making matter, even when intertwined with the security of a larger partner. The story unfolding on March 8, 2026, is therefore not about jets alone. It is about the very definition of alliance, the conditions under which sovereignty is exercised, and the future of defense cooperation in North America. The next few months will be critical. Every conversation about fighter jets, every radar installation in the Arctic, and every negotiation on missile defense will be watched by political leaders, military strategists, and analysts around the world. Canada's decisions will reverberate not only through Ottawa and Washington, but in capitals from Tokyo to Brussels to Moscow. The stakes are enormous, the pressure intense, and the eyes of history are watching. In a world where alliances are tested by transactional politics, where economic and military leverage are intertwined, Canada's choices over the F-35, the Gripen, NORAD, and Golden Dome will define its role as a middle power, capable of standing firm even in the shadow of its most powerful neighbour. For Canadians, this is also a moment of national reflection. It is a reminder that sovereignty is not given, it is asserted. It is a lesson in the balance of partnership, how to cooperate without ceding control, how to integrate with a powerful ally while still making independent decisions, and how to navigate the pressures of economic leverage and military necessity simultaneously. For the United States, it is a cautionary tale of the limits of pressure and transactional diplomacy. For the world, it is a masterclass in the art of strategic negotiation, alliance management, and the enduring importance of national agency in an interconnected security environment. And so, as we watch this story unfold, it is worth remembering that what appears on the surface as a disagreement over fighter jets is actually a much deeper narrative, a test of trust, a recalibration of power, and a statement about what it means to be a sovereign nation in the 21st century. Canada is not walking away from NORAD. It is not abandoning its obligations or its defense commitments. It is, however, demanding respect, fairness, and recognition that in a partnership, both sides have agency. That distinction, subtle but profound, could shape the future of North American defense for decades to come. As the spring of 2026 unfolds, the drama between Canada and the United States has moved from political maneuvering into a full-scale examination of what it means to be allies in an era of transactional power. Canada's decision on fighter jets has become a symbol of something much larger than military hardware. It is about asserting sovereignty in the shadow of a superpower, about standing firm when the stronger partner seems intent on using leverage rather than partnership to achieve its aims. In Ottawa, the KHN government has taken a measured, strategic approach, signalling that it values the alliance but will not sacrifice national interests or economic autonomy for the sake of convenience. Every statement, every press briefing, every carefully worded comment from Canadian defence officials is designed to balance two imperatives: reassure the United States that Canada remains a committed NORAD partner, and simultaneously make clear that Canadian decisions will be Canadian decisions. Public sentiment has played a surprisingly pivotal role. Canadians, already sensitive to economic pressures and political interference from Washington, have rallied around the idea of asserting control over their own defence future. Surveys indicate that support for purchasing the Swedish Gripen or even a mixed fleet has increased since Trump's public statements. For voters, the decision has transcended technical considerations. It is now a matter of national pride, a statement that Canada is not simply a junior partner to be dictated to, but a sovereign nation capable of balancing alliances with independence. Political analysts note that this wave of public support gives the Carney government the domestic mandate to continue negotiating firmly. And it is a rare moment where domestic politics and strategic necessity converge. At the same time, the operational implications for NORAD are complex and unavoidable. Integrating a mixed fleet of F-35S and Gripens requires careful recalibration of air defense systems. Communication protocols, radar links, and maintenance regimes differ, and Canada will need to coordinate closely with Washington to ensure that the Arctic and continental defense remain airtight. Military planners stress that this is not a trivial technical challenge, it is a realignment of the backbone of North American defense architecture. Even as Canada asserts independence, it remains tied to US approval and operational standards. A reminder that sovereignty in the military sphere is never absolute when decades of integration bind two countries together. Meanwhile, discussions around the Golden Dome missile defense system continue, though progress is measured. Canada holds the geographic cards, but the terms of participation are non-negotiable: fairness, economic benefit, and recognition of sovereignty. The Trump administration, having encountered resistance to its previous heavy-handed tactics, must now navigate a diplomatic landscape where public pressure, domestic politics, and strategic necessity all constrain its options. The stakes are high. A misstep in negotiation could expose the Arctic to vulnerabilities, weaken NORAD interoperability, or fuel perceptions of American overreach both at home and abroad. Observers note that the Canadian approach is a masterclass in middle power diplomacy. Rather than antagonizing the United States outright, Canada is leveraging its indispensable geographic and operational position to extract favorable terms. The strategy is subtle, almost surgical. Canada does not walk away from the alliance. It reshapes it. It ensures that commitments to continental defense, NORAD modernization, and Arctic radar installations continue, but on terms that recognize Canada's right to make independent choices. For a country often viewed as the junior partner in North American security, this is a statement of agency and strategic sophistication. From Washington's perspective, the unfolding scenario is challenging. The Trump administration has learned, perhaps belatedly, that pressure and threats can produce unintended consequences. Rather than cowing Canada into acquiescence, the public pushback has strengthened Ottawa's resolve. Military and political analysts in the United States note that this episode could set a precedent for other allies, signaling that American attempts to dominate procurement and strategic decision-making may face pushback from even long-standing partners. The lesson is clear. Even superpowers cannot dictate the terms of partnership without considering the domestic politics and sovereign interests of their allies. Looking ahead, the coming months will define the shape of North American defense for the next generation. Canada will finalize its fighter jet procurement, determine the operational integration of new aircraft into NORAD, and negotiate terms for participation in the Golden Dome Missile Defense Initiative. Each of these decisions carries implications far beyond Ottawa and Washington. Russia and China are watching closely, assessing how a middle power can assert itself without compromising continental security. NATO allies are taking notes, reflecting on the balance between reliance on American military hardware and national independence. And within Canada, the electorate is watching, evaluating whether the government's stance preserves national interests while maintaining the security and operational integrity of the continent. Ultimately, What is playing out is more than a dispute over jets or a missile shield. It is a story about sovereignty, partnership, and strategic leverage in a world where the rules of alliances are increasingly transactional. Canada's measured but firm response sends a signal to Washington and the international community. Participation in a partnership does not equate to subordination. Canada will uphold its defence commitments, modernize its military capabilities, and contribute meaningfully to continental security, but it will do so on its own terms. In an era of aggressive diplomacy, tariff battles, and superpower competition, that distinction could not be more important. As March 2026 progresses, one thing is clear: the Canadian-American relationship is being tested in a way that few could have predicted. The outcome of this negotiation, the decisions made about fighter jets, NORAD integration, and missile defense participation, will reverberate for decades. It will shape perceptions of sovereignty, alliance behavior, and middle power agency across the globe. And it will serve as a reminder that even the closest allies must navigate the delicate balance between cooperation and independence, between trust and leverage, and between loyalty and self-determination. For viewers watching this story unfold, the lesson is both immediate and timeless. Geopolitics is never just about equipment or money. It is about people, decisions, and the courage to assert one's interests even under pressure. Canada is demonstrating that courage, and the world is watching closely. This is more than a story about North American defense. It is a story about the enduring power of sovereign decision-making in an interconnected, high-stakes world, and the careful balancing act required when middle powers negotiate with superpowers. So as we continue to follow this evolving situation, remember that what may seem like a technical dispute over fighter jets is actually a microcosm of the broader challenges of international relations today. Canada's choices, the US response, and the outcomes of NORAD and Golden Dome negotiations will not only shape North American security, but also set a precedent for how nations assert agency and defend sovereignty in the face of pressure from the world's most powerful actors. In a way, the Arctic has become a classroom in strategy, diplomacy, and national courage. Canada has sent a clear message. It will defend its skies, protect its citizens, and participate fully in continental security, but it will do so as a sovereign partner, not as a subordinate. The United States, in turn, must adapt to a reality where alliances are negotiated, respect is demanded, and unilateral pressure may produce pushback rather than compliance. And for the rest of the world, this story is a vivid reminder that the dynamics between allies are complex, nuanced, and often a reflection of the delicate interplay between power, geography, and principle. As of this moment, the situation remains dynamic. Canada's final fighter jet decision has not yet been announced. NORAD modernization continues, and Golden Dome negotiations are ongoing. The stakes could not be higher, but if history has taught us anything, it is that careful diplomacy, combined with strategic patience and a clear sense of national interest, can preserve both security and sovereignty. Canada is showing the world that it is possible to walk that line. It is a high-stakes game, and the outcome will resonate far beyond the borders of North America. And that brings us to the end of this breakdown. What Canada is doing is unprecedented in recent memory, asserting independence while maintaining commitment, negotiating firmly while upholding alliances, and making decisions that reflect both principle and pragmatism. As viewers, what we are witnessing is history in the making. Keep watching, because every update on this story will continue to reveal the intricate balance of power, sovereignty, and security in one of the world's most consequential partnerships.